Okay, I think we can go ahead and start. The only thing is that this Zoom has a time limit, so we might have to stop like either before the 2 hour or the 2 hour and go on to a different Zoom because I don't have Zoom Premium.
Okay,
Yeah.
should I send the one I see into the chat?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay, Tanya, are you good?
Yeah.
Okay. Plan the United States ought to guarantee the right to housing rights. Can 15. In the APP, housing is defined as dignity, enforceable right, and auger. The rule requires moving housing political, moving it to the court, establishing housing enforceable right. The court uses as a burden and multifactorial, multifunctional, test. The fact is right dignity, rights from the most basic human need. Housing is dignity, rule over rights, Lindsay. Everyone has a rule. Everyone gets a fundamental right to housing through the process. The right to housing is a bundle of right that establishes the necessary components of a right to stay. 19. The court observes the right to housing is a bundle of rights not limited to shelter, included other rights to life, livelihood, health, education, food, clean water, sewage, and transport. Some letters should not be seen as legal arguments of rights, whereas the constituent features of the right to stay are recognized. Sample judgment reveals broader interpretations of the right to housing. South African and Indian both recognize the right to food sanitation, underpinned by dignity, equality, emphasis on the expansion of instrumental values of the right to say that advantages urban resilience. Rights are crucial in urban resilience using rights to bolster development, legislative agenda ensures resilient development is a goal. 17. If the goal of resilience supported development is not the infrastructure that needs to be resilient, the rights of urban states is emphasis on urban government, not letting new projects into institutions and practices of urban resilience and capacity of individual community institutions within a city to adapt and grow no matter the context, such as rights have instrumental values central resilience, having a right increase social protection that became resilience requires people's entitlement to be brought into alignment with rights claims as they develop a rights between vulnerability and time limits as a cause of increased vulnerability, shocks, cooperative resilience through what right can be made of infrastructure enabling factors thus resilience development without rights, looks egalitarian, logical, real rights, and resilience realizes the opportunity to accelerate progressive development, a right to housing, see Sarah. 16. What is going on with cities related to housing, future realization, but on how country position housing priority and sustainable development, houses and approach to closely way more momentum with sustainable development, ensure access for housing, positioning housing at the center for national agenda will be interventional housing, is an organization, urbanization not inclusive of housing rights, lead to sustainable city. Scenario 1 is these homelessness is rising, accelerating national disease by centering housing crucial to solving structural barriers in general. 21. America's not able to pay rent evictions to accelerate the speed throughout the country. Tenants are evicted double larger hospital more opportunities for the virus spread. Public health measures cannot be applied within a crowded home. The eviction rates are 2% more than 2009. Preventing evictions necessary, preventing spread policy challenged by opponents delaying evictions only temporary solutions for growing crisis. We still having to like we have people facing evictions in first which speaks to anticipated magnitude of crisis. Big challenge to view housing as core urban inclusion sustainability, specifically key cities are critical sites of pandemics, ensuring that is necessary for pandemic resilience workers. Or 20. Instead of becoming an ideal waiting for spotted viruses, a high concentration of deep inequality are more vulnerable than those that are less resource identifying gaps in city planning and health could stimulate more effective resource flows from planning approaches to economic cohesion and balanced distribution of resources to play a central role in preparing and mitigating adapting pandemics by outbreaks at the urban spread. Right to housing, solve structural issues, power remedial policies, for logical policy. Orders adopted to slow the pandemic, assuming the people have adequate housing, many communities housing is likely inadequate or not. Adequate these are not. New housing can be treated as human or not a commodity measures on the national level. National secure housing is a right and overcome structural bills. Emergency protection should develop that protects the rights without structure from people who continue to face a housing crisis. The mercy of wealthy poverty outgroup markets globalization means that future pandemics are inevitable. Try to flattening the curve trust on. Actually, the next pandemic may be worse than COVID without another pathogen with even deadly potential. Really close to already answer scientists discover more than 900 new viruses. Encroachment of natural habitats increased pathogen transmission sparking future pandemics more than one. Pulling out the U.S. is key. Other locations burn up, but the unique density and global conditions make the U.S. plan sufficient for EM. 16. I wish to use longer transportation. Find local exchange to discover more transportation routes are able to survive and spread historical evidence. Not a good guide for future events. The U.S. has highly good networks of social interaction that could be super spreaders like a mass agriculture to West Coast, or if they do have in pandemics, causing that's 921 worst pandemics in the existence of the human race. Got my regard to your harbor and viruses capable of affecting vital organs, pathogenic variants, cause pandemics, cause death, or debilitating diseases, disease resulting in complete shutdown, civilization, probably extinction of the human race. Scenario 2 is megacities. Incoming megacities are sustainable, but there's time to reverse the trend. Boon. 2. People expect to crime in urban areas. World without 14 new megacities, deficit, food, water, and security, conflict, crime, poverty, development, like my rights, and sustainable research, stress, and confront sustainability, challenge, resilience, and conflict are intertwined cities. Facing extreme heat and culture for there's still time for cities to not key changes to mitigate. There's a framework of urban zones and has a litany solutions, public transportation, better waste management, and urban acts of far. 2. Magazine needs to see for more consideration towards environment, streamlining waste management, and fewer waste, reducing carbon emissions, increase accessibility and transport, bike pathways, and public transport, green space, and irrigate urban pollution, and help key cities, school, urban agriculture, roof gardens, and forest promoting sustainable without reliance on the sole benefit of the food source. A number of magazines increase ideas about sustainability must transition into being a reality. U.S. action is key. The planet is modern internationally handing. 12. The U.S. is understanding the importance for our city growth. American governments deal with the infrastructure and cultivated growth. Cities are being polluted. Little partisan place. The United States cities have not changed the developing world like up to American cities in the U.S. Something clear signal urban small models fill the U.S. have even greater responsibilities in developing nation copy your solution. Any development should contribute to the environment. Otherwise, unsustainable megacities cause extinction. Crib 16 cities will home to 8 million megacities and subsist about resources existing depend on the preservation of balance between resource capacity if they're able to generate. Depend on the ways of global sustainability will be one of in cities, cities, other of resource prices, targets, or dominion hunkers, producing hackers for AI, cities, the future of civilization, and building cities. Quality solution, land, the planet, deep trouble is a consequence of population outrunning natural capacity, flooding, fire, health, problems, for environment management, exacerbate the effective disaster. These are warning signs for megacity collapse. Independently sustainable megacity solve climate change, right? Strong cities play a key role in combating climate change. Megacities are greatest opportunities to reduce emission. Megacities and southern contributing far less emission cities with affluent resources are driving global pollution. These wealthy megacities have full funding for adaptation. LA and New York carbon firms 8 times popular populations, reducing emission just a few wealthiest megacities go a long way towards mitigating climate change worldwide on the most vulnerable. Warming guarantees expansion spectrum. 19. Climate change builds ice temperatures increase ice advantage on killed heat observability, ecosystem collapse, destroying agriculture, billion refugees move, stress nation armed conflict, culminating nuclear war, the pain and pleasure and intrinsic value and disvalue, everything else progressive robust, near sense bundle. 18. Answer defines were particularly similar rewarding due to pleasure based with activity reward was also for efficiency competition fitness, including documented rewarding many bleeding to modulate pleasure even the opposite liking, represented by regions in the limbic system, remarkable conscious interactions, the air to the brain more developed in humans and pain, plays a role in ability to pursue rewards out of use away. Thus, the standard is consistency without automatically have to chill charges that refer. Additionally, 1 is active specificity, A is aggregation, every policy benefits 7 harms others, means a side continues to action. B is not enforced a distinction. If we foresee consequences and become part of our deliberation, mistakes and intrinsic to our actions that we tend to happen. B second is no active distinction. A psychology tuned to is an active self-government side, not active means being presented with the average source between 2 actions. B is active specificity. Governments have culpable for omissions for their purposes to protect the constituency. Otherwise, they would have no obligation to make murder legal. Only usual can escape culpability in the instance of trade of active specificity. Always different agents have different ethical standings that affect their obligations. Okay.
Okay. Are you good for cross? Yeah. Okay. Let's start on the disease scenario. What does the plan do to make housing more inclusive or affordable?
Sure. I guess 1 is that the plan guarantees a right to housing that in and of itself makes housing more affordable. Second, we would say that guaranteeing the right to housing stops things like forced evictions. So during pandemics, when a lot of people were being evicted from their houses, they were forced into unsustainable methods of quarantining. They were in overcrowded or unsanitary homes, all which propagated the spread of disease. The plan would stop things like unsanitary homes. They would give everyone a home that makes people have proper quarantining.
How does the government give everyone a home? Do they build houses or like what do they do?
Sure. I guess 1 is that all we defend is that the government guarantees a right to housing. We don't defend any specific remedy that comes off of that. If you read normal means evidence that says otherwise, we can defend that. But all we say is that the government has to guarantee people a house.
Okay, that makes sense. The mega cities scenario, why does the plan get modeled internationally? The hegemony evidence just seems to say that developing countries look out to us. What do they do to model a right to housing?
Sure, they follow the same framework that the US implements. I guess the Kasira and Zergobel cards sort of talk about how sustainable framework can look like putting housing at the center of that. Developing countries follow that framework. They can also follow on specific remedies that the US implements as a result of guaranteeing a right to housing. Some of those
incentivizes developing countries to model.
Sure, a lot of developing countries are faced with the same issues that the US is. A lot of these big cities that are growing right now have a lot of people living in slums, which are creating very unsustainable environments. They're also creating like governmental trouble. So these developing countries do have an incentive to follow on just to make dealing with megacities a lot easier than it is in the status quo.
Okay, sure. The megacities impact, the crib evidence says things like AI and WMD are existential. Why does the plan resolve that?
Sure, I guess we would say that megacities, the Poon 22 evidence is great because it talks about how megacities are becoming more unsustainable now, which unlocks a lot of these specific issues, and it creates like the bad governance of megacities, creates these issues. The plan shifts the governance and the urban planning of megacities to sort of resolve these issues. I guess a lot of these issues are as a result of like megacity governance being bad. So when the plan creates a framework that makes the governance better, that makes urban planning better, that in and of itself resolves.
Wait, I'm just confused as to why urban planning would resolve things like lack of industry regulation on AI. Like, what's the correlation between quote unquote sustainability and urban inclusion and resolving the development of such industries?
Sure, I guess when megacities are growing at an unsustainable rate, because megacities do incorporate things like artificial intelligence, if the government is not able to sort of protect that properly, it's not able to sort of grow it at a sustainable rate, then it becomes possible where runaway AI happens.
Okay, what does the plan do to ensure sustainable megacities?
I mean, the plan just implements a right to housing. We would say that a right to housing causes sustainability framework that's outlined in Kasira that causes the government to follow on to more sustainable development goals.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, so since Monica read the AC, I just wanted to comment on the structure of the AC. Obviously, you have the one advantage of urban resilience, and in there's two scenarios. This first is disease. Monica does a good job in cross explaining how the plan specifically resolves disease. But that was a point of Tanika's CX. The second one was obviously megacities. This Poon evidence is really contextual as to why megacities are increasing in the status quo. But giving a right to housing is uniquely key to combat them and to make them sustainable, which would cause a laundry list of threats. Does anyone have predictions on what the NC might look like based on CX? Okay. I was gonna say maybe focusing on Tanya does a lot of like questions based on the link chain on how specifically the right to housing solves these issues, disease and mega cities. So maybe a case page that focuses on the internal links of the AF might be in the NC would be my prediction. But we'll see the NC.
Okay. I just sent the one in C. Let me know when you're good.
It's opening. Give me a second. Okay, I'm good.
Lorado versus CATV has upheld the strength of poverty rights Lee, turning the core hold of the city select authority imposed direction more transitions and throughout the China state of lobby of poverty life as more can be realized preventing from everything tenants and choosing most of them and poverty owners right to excluded man evictions provisions on poverty owner rights excluded much greater than the letter and right to housing used to justify eviction more terms exacerbating land owner right to poverty that's been 714 right to housing as a protection from forced eviction security of tenant landlords so we don't hear the poverty owner cannot evict then they're not going to invest and they're going to make repairs to the houses to make housing stock less adequate such as court housing mess in the plan causes dominant effect of allowing the government to go on and power to this me 13 aim of the Constitution limit the government power rights to power the government to grow without limit make sure that's a reaction was granted power special constitutional upon right to everything housing one economy was a right is guaranteed the government has the limited power to find and improve the constitution and access for setting positive rights whose the right to open government comply public housing when you land is using and doing secret rights to use the public power to some of the road to set away in the end no one has the right positive rights positive rights for separate rights no power not limits and poverty rights are the basis for agricultural products to be destroyed turning civil poverty rights instead for economic development through increased but its royal can use to no ownership that recognized poverty rights farmers a little bit to control the resources for ownership or lacking really obviously investment industry at all right to exclude government cannot create assets to general public property own property rights to exclude which agriculture industry and native disguise and other right as a justification food insecurity goes into that script the teenager revenue climate increase in the high risk of racial economies but will likely be with food undergoing something about chemical weapons nuclear conflicts with reaching stretching food and conflict multiplying panic regime Russia the USA would deploy to atomic weapons next off counterplan tax United States also adopt streamline waste management increase motor reserve in city sufficient energy efficient standards through George 50 building require each city county to provide housing model after California Senate bill for the Bixer evidence and eliminate the fair cloth amendment plank one ensures sustainable megacities we've inserted one see evidence move planked and it solves warning that's marginal to addressing the climate crisis and construction crowds which are fitting stability for energy efficient settings option of energy efficient structures and equipment restoring these buildings and the living use affordable spaces net use zero having bottom for building plank two ensures housing exposure federal in this bill require at least one housing opportunity for state homeless individuals domestic projects and public pension and talent housing increasing obligation plan to include them when individuals require the county basis housing obligation plan before they subsequent year housing obligation when the state charge requires money to be positive holding obligation projects require housing to be the homeless that homeless security low income homeless students compatible regional housing lease allocation to provide housing plank 3 solves housing the fair club amendment blocks public housing that's Garo 20 fair club amendment access public housing difficult for makes the government to buildings using public housing offers to better prevents using traditional housing cards and no need housing never to secure housing limit supply we can eliminate the fair club amendment next solve the economy is recovering but fragile the housing market is stable but inflation continues so that scrambles 8 the economy is performing better than GDP expended 2% spending has been Brazilian hiking is coming to an providing official continued down improving medicine resistant we've had improving low unemployment housing market stabilizing home housing more paying all over with an all-time highs government intervention in the housing market decimates the housing market and increases inflation that's Kinsley trying to intervention in housing has been a failure demand side slowly increased housing intervention could end to efforts in inflation increasing recession housing market costs may be peaking to increasing demand for housing is what the Fed is set to achieve against inflation housing by president one index decreasing shelter is the most effective to bring down housing holding colony housing prices decrease demand Congress will do well to prevent stress housing by rolling up prices so being counterproductive risk of top of the housing market is either strong recession but disability as you know Congress to for housing there could be much enhanced demand kinetic animal water increase inflation, versus projection economy, decline cascades and go nuclear defense does not assume post-COVID shit as Mavic. 21 second, Great Depression of low security, high couplings, global system, enable research, bringing farming health and retail, increasing the interactions, terrestrial, digital, world alliance with China and the US will be far thinking that later more for nuclear chemical weapons, launch and accidents, cause War II, Great Depression history repeats itself, and to submit to force zeros, refers to infection, because there's war, US, China military for Taiwan, the assets, and proliferation of war, a nuclear competition between NATO and Russia. Next off, court filings are down over the past year. That's for clear. Trend the judiciary reducing data sharing drops in the fighting across the system. The court center thing measures plus more housing all part of the federal judiciary. Also, courts filings drops to 27 about judicial collisions down 84% of all judicial smaller collisions. The vagueness and the right to housing creates a spike in litigation cases. Walters 625 right to housing, how would affect housing prices, would force governments to projects for Harvard Time and laws full of lead to more direct investment full of language lawyers because require loss of judicial interpretation of meaning even litigation and issues that are conscious legalism when clogs occur data protection is child. That's Hallie 20 stating reduce the workload of judiciary but data protection cases promised to be long and involved. They are classified involved composite over judgment checking the cases of the documents consistent with the manifestos and operation cases and data cases present more technically complicated courts Apple setting data protection is key to AI both upsides and downside risk access to that EBRs 20A is raising concerns in many counties and impurity scientists argue essential ways AI could accelerate technology solve problems that are existing in the climate disease farming climate for opportunity to climate security innovation issues in private life AI could be taken into the Western requires measurement to private citizens confidence legal certainty operation and regulation can address AI needs to be implemented in ways that are beneficial case disease scenario no extinction that's better 21 unlikely the future next law average holding like something like the bias of pandemics issue unlikely mitigation as increase in human race population multiple infection human progress knowledge of how expanded which will more vaccines rest your need therapeutics direction and more sophisticated medical care. Second is they can't solve the bar yam evidence says that all countries with higher interconnectedness ensures pandemics that countries like India, China, Africa, etc. all thumb the megacities advantaged other countries thumb crib is literally about unsustainable Chinese megacities posing access to there's no warrant why China would model the plan no modeling Trump killed that's Collins eighth indictment took the country and posted an interview trying to react by presenting seven fan language and way of rhetoric of the country the beginning of the election and represent whether to use the national interest and measure overall confidence in the future of U.S. democracy institution principles define the United States and the creative evidence says that all cities are targets for disease epidemic but there's no one for why inclusive urban planning solves the lack of government restrictions on aid development and geopolitical tensions causing WND use no catastrophic warming that's Billy 20 new study confirms the worst Chinese songs are now the future will be warming catastrophe so dire predictions divert from sorry in which emission would boost of carbon nearly 1,400 ppm and likely of high emissions is low possibilities to really profit the next few years. The global economy has unlikely raised emissions and ways to project outcome coal consumption will peak place of Solaris vision less than 2 degrees. Good news on climate warming is key to the Russian economy, commercial trade in the northern sea, agriculture, fishing, and mining. This carbon training Russia, capitalizing on arctic shipping goals, irreparable landscape, declining fishermen and fundamental stock, high resin, heavy mining, energy projects, bureau, actually trading governance plan with the most table industry developing northern patches, strategic community in Asia and Europe, enable mining gas, production, tourism, trading, 50% patches, preference in winter, money pouring, thawing ocean made oil, natural gas mining, more profitable, reducing shipping, electrical, Russian companies benefit from warming, contraction beyond current levels, sparks Russian lash out, great power war this project. 20 economic stability and relish that could lead to climate attack NATO. See logical as evidence of Western candidates topple the government does. A risk of 90% depends on the US operation constituted an attack. Diplomatic construction might be the source of such a mode of Russian owners. They've found the government's ability to control them. Might decide just like NATO asking for secession to explore Russian responsibility for attacks and grids or satellites. US responding can now such attacks turn into kinetic attacks. Go back to the disease advantage, no disease impact. That's ordered. 20 global pandemic fall short of threat to humanity. Deeper biological theories such as pathogen likely to use these conclusion made depression is the allegation murder that kill 1% intensity of the presence of oxygen and the optimal versus civilization for 50% death with non physical precipitate collapse against us reasonably facilities like to me through future events even if global is strongest against us from possible war because there's probably 0.1% capital with how long humanity has lasted and large scale disease solved nuclear war that's positive 20 release are confident early to create an election actually we're doing the goal about fighting a survey of little more disease come from that person that conduct to be seen shut down much more people you think okay anybody knows their military units are soldiers are rescued in campaigns pose greater dangers in pandemics. Cut the card out in pandemics.
Okay, are you good for cross?
Yeah.
Okay. Status of the counterplan?
Condo and we can kick planks.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about the Posen evidence. I guess large-scale diseases stop war. So why did Russia invade Ukraine if diseases stop war?
Sure, we would say that when Russia invaded Ukraine, like the pandemic was slowing down. We saw that like global infectious rates were decreasing. We saw an increase in herd immunity as well as the well-being of soldiers, which is why Russia had the ability to invade.
Well, no, Russia invaded Ukraine in the thick of the pandemic. I guess like why didn't the pandemic stop the invasion?
Again, we said that during the pandemic, when Russia invaded, we saw a drastic global increase in people getting access to vaccines, decreasing like lethality of
the invasion was good.
the invasion was not good. We're saying that Russia invaded because the pandemic was slowing down.
Okay, that's fine. Let's talk about the property rights disad. I guess like why do property rights seem to mean that the government grows without limit? The Bajrami 13 card doesn't necessarily talk about like specifically evictions. I guess like what's the domino effect there?
Yeah, so the Bajrami evidence, basically what it's saying is that positive rights, i.e. a right to housing, is incredibly vague, which allows the government to go on a power trip. So for example, it talks about the example of public housing. In order to grant people a right to housing, the government will have to build houses. And the way that they get this land to build houses in the first place is through using eminent domain, which gets rid of other people's
I
property.
guess eminent domain exists now, like in the SQO. I guess why does the plan uniquely
We've
make
read
that work?
uniqueness evidence that says that in the past, the court specifically has upheld the strength of property rights. The plan would obviously overturn that.
I guess what specifically about a right to housing infringes on property rights?
Sure. So there's like two links. First is property rights. Again, the Bajrami evidence says that rights are unlimited in the sense that they're not bound to the government and that the court just has to provide people something. Housing turns into attic housing, which turns into land and water, which is what the 1AC solemnity evidence says, which impedes on other rights. Second is the evictions internal link, which is the Greenhouse evidence. It says that a right to housing justifies eviction moratoriums, which decreases property rights because landowners can't evict people when they're not paying rent.
Okay, the warming impact turn, I guess why is the North Arctic key to the Russian economy?
Yeah, the Kramer evidence says that the government is investing a ton of money into the Northern Arctic. It talks about how it's attracting a ton of shipping between Asia and Europe, which is crucial to Russian trade. It also enables a litany of other factors, i.e. mining, natural gas, tourism, etc.
I'll take prep.
Okay, well, Annika is taking prep. Maybe we can go through the NC. So as Tanya read 4 off, 3 of them were disadvantages, and then the second off, but the fourth like off is the counter plan. So the first disad is this property rights disad, like Tanya explained. The right to housing would allow like the government to go on a power trip, just saying, oh, now we can expand further. This second, or actually the second counter plan, since Annika asked the status in CX, specifically about the planks, does anyone have any predictions on what the 1AR might go for in terms of conditionality?
Maybe the 1AR reads like being able to kick any plank is like really abusive because it doesn't hold the like 1NC to it doesn't hold the 1NC to like their advocacies, and neg flex, you can still have neg flex without having like a bunch of planks and being able to like kick as many as you want.
Yeah, perfect. So like a condo bad argument or condo plagues bad argument in the 1AR. This third disad is talks about the economy. So it's just a typical econ disad. And then you have the core clog disad along with on the case page reading disease impact defense, and then this warming defense plus the Russia turn, which Tanya explains in CX. Based on the NC, what do we think is strategic about the NC and what possibly would be unstrategic and something that Annika could focus on in the 1AR? Okay, so I was going to say, I think personally, this is a strategic NC through the use of multiple disads. I think being able to kick planks might put Tanya in a bit of an awkward spot with condo plagues in the 1AR, but like I personally think this is a good way to deal with the AC.
Okay, I'm ready for 1AR. I'll send out the doc. Okay. Okay, all the 1AR stuff should be in the doc. Let me know when you're good for an order.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay, it'll be case the advantages in order, and then it'll be the offs in order. Are you good, Tanya? I can't see you. Can you?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Okay. The plan guarantees a right to housing, which changes urban planning through litigative accountability, spills over to a right to city, which makes megacities sustainable and stops extinction from warming. It also prevents pandemic transmission, which independently stops extinction. 1 and C1, yes, disease chances that globalization increase the virulence of new diseases, and they get to a point where we can't accurately prepare for a disease that's coming. The U.S. is uniquely key. That was 1AC, part M16, which says that the globalization of the U.S. and the social interactions make the disease spread way easier in the U.S. The posing 20 card pandemics don't stop wars. People know how Russia invaded Ukraine, even though we were in the midst of a global pandemic and diseases caused war. The increased tension between countries would cause them to go to war with each other. The megacity advantage, one and C1, other countries do follow, and even if China doesn't follow, and developing countries are enough to bump the impact, they haven't in any evidence comparison as to why China uniquely triggers the impact. 1 and C2, this is talking about a tweet that Trump said, but it's not tackling global urban planning, especially since Biden is increasing U.S. credibility right now. 1 and C3, urban planning changes the way that governance happen, which solves all of the impacts of runaway AI, etc. 1 and C4, yes, warning inspectors says that once we reach a tipping point that causes resource wars, etc., means that we come back now is the turning point. 1 and C5, no, it's not key to the economy. Oil, etc., all hold up the Russian economy. Cross prove that Suez can hold up the Russian economy. It's not the arches that happened. The Frederick 22 card Russian recessions and umbrella economists. 19 public window chains that will past few years market of total economic real income deck 7.7% of the ministry, pressure 1% curve upper 2030 2019 will continue to sense of disappointment that may cause for 2019 for the Russia will be a new recession, and Russia won't go nuclear because of fear of loss of property risk. He said. One is no action just because there is a possibility that government can take private resources. It doesn't mean that all these big industries will stop investment, and affordable housing is key to food security. The scope country to births. 19 the important connection between housing, building, food access, families experiencing financial hardship is little money enough for food, feast, efficient homeless, live in disadvantaged neighborhoods, access to healthy, affordable housing is likely homeless to demonstrate the link between lack of shelter, risk of food insecurity, if it's not sufficient or sustainable. 4% for only makes it difficult to paying for housing. If having suitable, affordable housing means having less income to spend necessity of food. Second is a causal connection between food and stability, self necessity, and also low merit and food conflicts are violent conflict requires people the means and the will people in the brink of starvation, not in the position to result of violence, the social rights and the peers to have a visibility relate to shortage, discontent, or more common political structures, land corruption, democratic reforms, and economic problems. Second off, cause of whether the time comes one air can't read its best offering as multiple worlds with different unique conditions that collapse to what's undercover protecting engagement just will solve the concave if we permanently get to test the app we get 60 jobs like putting 100 in state terms. One is permanently count on, second is permanent growth, third is the rights deficit. Only the app reorients the basis of unsustainability, which are private. Thus, any form of legislation feeds into the very system that causes unstable megacies. That's one is global and consider. Fourth is the court's deficit, lack of legal rights don't hold the government accountable for improper remedies because people can't sue nor can go dispute cross actions to fit the complexity deficit. The counterpoint to solve unstable megacies now but can't predict future technology or issues that plague megacies. Six is that they don't stop evictions or ensure sanitation, which doesn't stop the root cause of disease. The Econ has had. The housing market is unstable. Systemic risk guarantee collapse. A 24 mortgage was higher than the 20 years. City prices, U.S. housing affordability lower than peak of housing in 2006. The Federal Reserve median price of the $700,000 to $300,000. Median income is $70,000. Interest rate of 6.7% on November 2012. The housing price is $197,000. Income was $52,000. Interest rate only 0.4%. Rates have only risen. Access to housing increased growth by 36.3%. Facial equilibrium data model society. Model 19. Creating housing limit the workers who grow access to high productivity growth and housing constraints. Cities push up prices lower. Guarantee wealth and output restricting housing jobs and limited growth is anticipated by housing prices. Has data from 2020 areas find increasing housing increases growth 36.3%. The clock decide. One is the non-unity code proves like legalist. 22 the came in the pandemic and court closed evidentiary rules meant the lawyers had to get to defendants and witnesses show making it impossible to move forward. COVID restrictions limited access to backlogs were giving justice and prosecution excuse to process the defense lawyers were hearing about the worsening conditions. Catholic annexation is the housing crisis root cause of overwhelming court code only absolute orchards. 8-1 COVID inadequate corporate instruction and eviction moratoriums resulted in more background treatment. The unprecedented input of the court system nationwide grapple with addressing the root cause head on can alleviate the burden by addressing financial hardship. We can mitigate the root of the backlog eviction miracle has far-reaching consequences of overwhelming places to administrate the sheer volume creates an untenable backlog. The system overall effectiveness is compromised backlog. It rush out those compartmentalizations of housing and data protection go through different courts and have different filing processes, which means that housing doesn't trigger the link. Fourth is that the link to the government implements proper housing policies in a fear of a flood of lawsuits, which limits the amount of cases that go to court. Fifth, that is a linear impact. The right to housing doesn't immediately trigger a flood of lawsuits, and rather a few go at a time in court cases at precedent for the future.
Okay, I'll take prep while everyone's turning.
Okay, so while Tanya takes prep, we can talk a little bit about the 1AR. Based on the 1AR, does anyone think the 2NR will make any strategic, or actually, first of all, predictions that were kind of correct about the one AR were the conditionality bad that someone had mentioned. So that was a good prediction. I think there's a bunch of link turns made on the disad along with non-uniqueness pushes specifically on the court clog, and the econ disad was another, I guess, noteworthy thing in the 1AR. Does anyone have any ideas on what the 2NR might go for based on the 1AR?
I guess they could go for like a sequencing question on econ because the evidence that was read was about like after you give access to housing, the economy grows. Whereas like when NC evidence was about like, NC evidence was about like government investment.
Yeah, perfect. Does anyone have any idea what position the 2NR might go for other than the econ disad? Okay, well, I guess we'll have to see what Tanya pulls up for the 2NR.
Okay. The order will be the property rights disad, the advantage counterplan, the court clog disad, and then case.
Wait, can you repeat the order again?
Yeah, it's the property rights disad, the advantage counterplan, the court clog disad, and then case.
Okay.
Okay, are you good? The property rights decide not going for it will concede that there's no impact of food insecurity, which takes out the link turn. The advantage counterplan not going for it was conditional. Condo is good. We get what we did. One is negative flex. Negative is all reacted in the advocates. The two has infinite prep to take out when you see strategy. Condo restores competitive activity. Second is negation. It only has to disprove the app. Condo stimulates effective negation by testing multiple angles. Your interpretation avoids clash by insulating the case from contradiction. Three is critical thinking. Four is smart. When you see choices adaptation and larger that offsets when you see process clarification. Make cleanse that impact trends off codes. Four is reasonability add-ons permutation straight turn and benefit. And when you see choice check, they need to improve in route 3D manage the substance crowd always going for for wanting the Turner Treaty conceding contradiction. Solves 5 is reject the argument of the team voting F1 dissuade condo. In other debates, the court clock decided not going for the uniqueness overwhelms link. Our evidence is way recent and more contextual. It concludes that even if courts are backed, filings themselves are down now, which mitigates the risk of the long term. But the horseshit evidence from the 1 year also says that clog is due to other factors like staff shortages, but the plan cannot solve the Econ dissat. Framing issue for the dissat is that the 1 year just did not have any empirical evidence or qualified authors, but empirics are on our side. The 08 recession happened because of excessive mortgage lending that fueled a housing bubble that inevitably burst. The dissat turns and always the case. First, its on timely decline causes war, and really the symbolic evidence, which was conceded, says that all sectors of the economy are interrelated and global interconnected of things like housing, healthcare, finance, etc. makes conflict escalation incredibly faster than the app can resolve any of their impacts regarding housing, disease, insecurity, etc. Second is scope, global wars, and multiple hotspots for escalation. They've conceded the Malvic evidence that said that things like Iran, Israel, war, South China Sea confrontation, US China war over Taiwan, nuclear proliferation, Russia, NATO, etc. That definitionally outweighs because you only die once. 3 is that there's an external impact from the case speech that we're going to cross-life here. The Frederick evidence says that economic contraction beyond current levels causes Russian cyber attacks as a response to domestic unrest, to economic decline, which causes nuclear war with the United States. I'll do the line by line proper here. The McGowler evidence, it's bad. It's not contextualized to overall economic growth in comparison to recent months or even the pandemic. It just says, quote unquote, the Fed has increased home prices since 2012, which was not implicated in the context of the broader economy or warranted. Why that ensures structural collapse. The 1C travel evidence is way more recent and concludes that a recession can be avoided because GDP has expanded 2%, consumer spending has remained resilient, inflation is improving, and the federal hike rate has ended, which is what the uniqueness evidence says that would have caused a recession. The link-turn evidence entirely relies on the fact that intervention drives down prices, but that's wrong. One is that our link evidence says that the imposition of price controls on the housing market creates an artificial shortage of affordable housing. Things like rent caps or limits on sale prices disincentivizes landlords and developers to maintain their property if they cannot guarantee a return on their investments, which decreases net affordability. Second is that our link always on scope. The link turns solely examines the relationship between affordable housing and the housing market, but it's not in the context of the broader economy. They've conceded the inflation internal link that says that decreasing demand for housing is necessary to reduce inflation, since housing represents a third of the consumer price index, and decreasing demand is the most effective measure to bring down prices across the whole economy. That lowers prices throughout the entire economy, which is what generates net consumer spending, which is what both sides agree is the thing that causes the most amount of growth. 3 is that our link always on time frame. The mere perception of government intervention spoofs investors and property owners immediately, which decreases supply investment. People will not sit down and do calculations as to how many jobs the plan creates or how much regional growth the plan is able to create in the long term, but what they will withdraw investments because empirics are on our side. Independently, the 1 year housing variety evidence is not contextualized to the effects of affordable housing in the global economy or the entirety of the US economy. It solely talks about how increasing housing in places like New York, San Francisco, etc. is able to generate net regional growth. They have not made a warrant as to why that's crucial to the global economy or crucial to the US economy. Only our link evidence contextualizes it in the context of inflation, as well as the way that investors make investments in the context of the economy, which is that we're definitely ahead on link debate here. Independently, the 1 year has conceded this impact, which is that it definitely always on probability and should hold the line at new 2 year cross applications of case 2 or extrapolation of defense, because that was just not made in 1 year. You should use the logic of, did my understanding of this argument change from the 1 year to the 2 year? If it did, you should reject it, because I do not have a 3 year to respond to it. Now, the case page. I'm not sure why they went for the disease sorry when they conceded there's no extinction from diseases. Yes, Tanika has extended that globalization means that diseases are inevitable, but they have not responded to our 2 pieces of impact evidence that said that there's no extinction from disease. We have not contested whether or not diseases exist, but the Bender evidence says that pandemics are not going to reach a toll on the human life or cause extinction. There's a couple of warrants and reasons as to why the evidence is better in terms of qualification. First, the Bender evidence is from a senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security and Infectious Disease Critical Care Emergency and medicine physician, which definitely always their dimatis evidence that does not have any other qualifications. Second is, I'll extend the warrants here. The Bender evidence says that a multitude of things prevents disease from causing human extinction. First is mitigation efforts, i.e. things like enterprises in the human immune response system that leaves the population able to withstand the infection. The ORD evidence also says that pathogens are unlikely to lead to extinction because there's not an empirical correlation between infectiousness and lethality. Second is things like human progress, i.e. knowledge, development of vaccines, more therapeutics, vaccines to therapy, sophisticated medical care, etc., is going to resolve and the likelihood that disease ever causes extinction. There was not a warrant extended in the 1 year as to why disease causes extinction, which I should not be putting on this advantage. The megacities advantage, they're missing the interlinked modeling. They've conceded the fact that the crib evidence says that the cities that pose existential risks are cities in China, i.e. Shenzhen, but there's no warrant as to why China would model the plan because Trump has terminally killed U.S. democracy, and there's no reason why China would simply model the plan. The only 1 year extension warrant was developing countries follow the plan. They have not read the evidence that says that developing countries, megacities, are the ones that cause extinction. But independently, there's also no impact to warming. The Bailey evidence is excellent. It does empirical scientific research and concludes that even emissions would boost carbon atmosphere to 1,400 ppm, and the likelihood of high emission scenarios is incredibly low. There's no likelihood of tipping points because we simply do not get more than 3 degrees, which is what their evidence relies on.
I'll just take prep.
Okay, so the UNR obviously answered conditionality, kicked the counter plan, the court cog disad, and the Freight's disad went for Econ. I think something important to note about the 2NR is that it focused a lot on comparative impact calculus and as to why their link evidence is specifically better than the 1AR's evidence. So a lot of evidence comparison in impact calc and the 2NR and warrant extension on the AC. Anyone have predictions on what the 2AR might go for? Okay, I guess we'll have to see.
Okay. Let me close my door. Okay, is everyone ready? It'll be case and then the disad. The plan guarantees a right to housing, which changes urban planning through legislative accountability. This spills over to a right into the city, which makes megacities sustainable and stops extinction from warming. Warming turns and outweighs Econ. First is you should use Pascal's wager to frame your ballot. We don't know what the effects will look like, what the effects of warming will look like past the tipping points, but we do know what economic session will look like because what's happened before. That was 08, COVID, etc. And we haven't gone to war, which means that the economy can bounce back. Next is that warming turns economic decline. It creates tension between countries over a lack of resources, which causes economic ties of stress and cooperation to lessen, which causes countries to go to war. Next is that warming outweighs on reversibility. Once we reach the tipping point, we can't return, but we can always bounce back from recessions. The line by line will concede that there's no extinction from disease, the warming, the megacity scenario, the modeling plan. That was one AC boom. Developing countries all have megacities that are becoming more sustainable. Megacities are going in the status quo right now. They also do have incentive to fall on. That was one AC Hen 12. The negative hasn't read any evidence that says that China is key to the emissions of the world, but that was what one AC Marit said. It specifically says that affluent cities in the US are what is causing warming right now, which means that once the right to housing is enacted, which means that the app is able to solve emissions that the US is enacting. The Bailey 22 evidence was horribly underexplained in the 200. It said that Spectre 19 is definitely better because it said that there are tipping points which are reaching right now. When emissions rise, that means that environments are not able to adapt, and they reach a tipping point where environments are not able to adapt to new changes that are happening. It also causes resource wars. That was dropped by the 200, which means that resource wars definitely cause nuclear war to happen. This ad. We're going for the straight turn. First, the non-unique mortgage prices or interest rates, hikes are causing inflation right now in the status quo. That was the first piece of evidence that we read on this, the McKellar A24 card. This also postdates their uniqueness because their uniqueness is not to take into account that the housing market is doing extremely poorly right now. This evidence is absolutely great because it says that the housing market specifically is unsustainable because mortgage prices are soaring now. We're soaring right now. We see that the housing bubble is at the place where it was in the 06 bubble, which means that we are at the brink for a housing crash right now. Only the app can solve that. That was a link term we read. There are a couple arguments that we're making on the link term. First is that government intervention takes time to decrease the economy because it's not a huge spending package right away. Remedies are passed one after another, and they're not all big infrastructure packages. The second argument that we're making is the app is a framework shift, which means that it's only reallocating money spent towards sustainable development, which means that the link isn't instantly triggered, but our link turn happens faster, which is that housing increased the economy because when housing becomes affordable, that means that people have more disposable income that are able to spend in the money they're able to spend in the economy. That was the Moretti 19 evidence. It does a case study when it says that how the increasing housing supply and affordable housing increases our growth rate by 36.3%, which means that when you have affordable housing in the world of the app, that means that you're able to get people affordable housing faster, which increases the economy on a national scale a lot faster than the disad means that you have a decrease in economy. Next is that you should not grant the 200 any perception spin in the Kingsley court. Hold the line. The cross application did not make any sense. Thus the case outweighs. Good debate.
Good debate.
Yay, that was such a great debate. It's confident. Yay. All right. So we can talk, would anyone want to have like a little bit of an in-depth discussion over the debate, or are we feeling like we understood what went on? I know there's like the little like hand feature on Zoom. So if you want to have like an in-depth discussion, not something super long, but just going over how the round played out, maybe like put your little Zoom hand up if you don't want to like unmute.
Or you can type in the chat if you don't want to.
Yeah. Right. Okay, it seems like a good amount of people want to have a bit of an in-depth discussion over the debate. So since the debate boiled down to the disad and the case in the 2NR and the 2AR, we can focus on those last two speeches. So clearly Tanya goes for the Econ disad in the 2NR. Annika reads these two pieces of evidence in the 1AR, the uniqueness evidence as is the straight turn, reads this uniqueness evidence, and then the argument, the link turn, that the plan would actually increase sort of economic prosperity. So I guess we can go through the 2NR quickly. Let me pull up my flow actually. The top of the 2NR on the disad does what a great disad 2NR always does, an overview of the analysis and what the 1AR fundamentally misses, and the comparative impact analysis that I talked about a little while ago. So Tanya makes these arguments that like the economy outweighs on scope, and that should outweigh other weighing metrics because you would only die once. She extends this impact analysis. The Malvac evidence gives like a bunch of warrants as to why war could escalate because of economic collapse, and how it turns warming and outweighs warming because it happens a lot faster than warming would, which was the impact analysis done on the case page as well. I think something really noteworthy about this disad 2NR that I think should be in like every disad 2NR is the really in-depth analysis of the evidence and the contextualization of the warrants. Does anyone have any specific analysis specifically on the uniqueness or link turn level that they thought Tanya did well in the 2NR against the 1AR's arguments?
I think like weighing the link versus link turn and how like the internals are reached through like looking at like author credibilities, and also just like how like the evidence compares, and weighing how like you like how the disad has a stronger link and how that could outweigh the link turn.
Yeah, perfect. So I think there were three like main arguments as to why like the link should outweigh the link turn. Does anyone remember a specific argument as to why like the link evidence should outweigh the link turn on scope, for example, or something of the sort? I think there's a few arguments here that Tanya explains kind of this inflation link that we should stop demand because that's the only thing, or inflation is, sorry, housing is contributing. This is all econ stuff that honestly, I'm in AP economics right now. And even the econ dissent is still kind of doing my head in the loop. But about the consumer price index and how housing prices are specifically key and make up a third of the consumer price index. And so how that magnifies the link because it makes up that much of the economy. Um, I think there's also a time frame argument that Tanya makes, which is also weighing against the link turn, that it spooks investment and decreases supply and investment in the housing market that might be helpful. Does anyone have any other arguments that they thought the 2NR made that were good against this?
I think that there was like an interconnectivity argument that was made about how like the context of the link turn was only applicable to like certain cities in the US, while like the dissent itself was applicable to the entire world, so it destabilizes the global economy, maybe.
Yeah, perfect. Anyone else have any other thoughts? Anya, if you were maybe thinking about this 2NR, what do you think, like in your head, what was the strongest argument coming out of the 2NR, maybe on like the evidence comparison level?
I think it's definitely like was like talking about like the link outweighs on scope, because I do think like I was like reading the evidence during 2NR prep and I just definitely like housing affordability improves like the economies of certain cities in the United States, but the link evidence that was in the one talks about it in the context of like reducing inflation, which impacts the entire like US economy.
Okay, yeah, so I think the majority of time is spent on the dissent, obviously, and then there's just this impact defense that's done on the case page. Obviously, the disease not causing extinction, which Tanika doesn't end up going for in the 2NR or the 2AR, but this Bailey evidence as to why climate tipping points won't be getting hit. So maybe we can move into the 2AR. So I thought the 2AR honestly was going to go for condo, so I was surprised on the case and dissent combination. I'm a sucker for the condo 2AR. But I think a great thing that the 2AR does is give a quick overview at the top of the case and explain why warming would turn econ. And by answering this tipping point argument, I think there's a try or die argument kind of implicated in the 2AR as to why climate, it's like try or die for housing being able to solve these megacities that are developing in developing countries, which reaches the tipping points, which would probably outweigh Tanya's evidence. And there's some link on the dissad. Maybe does anyone think there was like a winning 2AR argument or just a really good argument on the link level that maybe had outweighed the 2NR's evidence, or just an argument you had picked up on?
You said there was 2NR evidence. Which evidence did the 2NR read? Or is
Oh,
it just
I didn't read evidence in the 2NR. I think Rebecca was talking about like evidence comparison of the link and the link.
Oh, okay, yeah.
sorry, I made that unclear.
No, you're good.
Okay, so I think the 2AR makes this really good argument about the link not being instantly triggered. No, like it's not, it's like a gradual plan. There's not just like one big investment which would automatically collapse like investor confidence or the length that the 2 and R tries to go for or goes for. So I saw that as like a big like kind of weighing argument. Also, this housing bubble being at the brink like it was in '08 or in '06, which should post-date the other uniqueness evidence, I think, was the two main arguments. And all the impact calc on the case page. But yeah, I think this was a great debate, a really great example of like, obviously decide case 2 and R and 2 AR, and a great example of a policy round. So yeah, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.